was hidden in an attic where my brother lived. My family was separated. My mother and father were someplace else. I don't even know where they were at the time.
The Jews were ordered to leave our hometown on a given Sunday, take with them belongings only that they can carry.
And we accepted that. Nothing we could do, no place we could go, no place to hide, no place to run to.
And everybody wanted to know what's going to happen. Where are they going to send us? And why? And can you help us? And can you get us out?
The Holocaust was an effort by the Nazi government of Germany to destroy an entire race of people. This campaign resulted in the murder of millions of innocent human beings during World War II.
Sylvia, Bert, Saul, and Paula lived through this experience.
My father, having been a extreme optimist all his life, always felt that this situation and condition wouldn't go on for very long, and that Hitler would very soon be kicked out of the government, and things would change for us. There were a tremendous amount of harassment of my parents, and there were very, very few weeks where the Nazis wouldn't go by our house at night and throw rocks and stones into our windows. I can remember incidents where rocks, like probably weighing 2 or 3 pounds, were thrown through our windows and wound up in my bed. Very, very scary. And I would say that even to this day, I'm 70 years old. If I hear a strange noise at night, I have a flashback. It takes me back to my childhood days, 1933, 1934, and 5, and 6, and 7, when these incidents occurred.
Bert is born in 1925 in Gmunden, a small central German town of 200 families. Bert and his sister are raised in a house built by their great-great-grandparents. Their father runs a family store and a small farm. When Bert is 8, the Nazi Party takes control of the German government. Gradually, Jewish people become excluded from public life. Under the Nazi regime, Bert and his sister are expelled from public school, and the family is forced to sell both their farm and their store to a local member of the Nazi Party. The price is dictated by the government.
I came home to Gmunden, and our house was in shambles. It was absolutely torn apart from top to bottom. My mother and my aunts were there, received me, were very distraught, and I said, "Where's my father? Where's my dad?" "Well, Papa isn't here." Where is Papa?" "Papa is not feeling well." "Well, what's the matter with him?" And they slowly told me that the night before, November the 9th, that they broke into our house, Nazis broke into our house, tore everything apart, and they beat my father so badly that he had to go to the hospital.
Gradually, the German government forces Jewish children out of all educational institutions. By 1937, the closest school Bert and his sister are allowed to attend is over 100 miles away from Gmunden. Bert is at this school on the morning of November 9th, 1938, when the German authorities enter his classroom, confiscate the school books, and arrest the teacher. All of the children are sent home. The beating occurs on the night of anti-Jewish terror known as Kristallnacht, German for the Night of Broken Glass. Encouraged by the government, local populations throughout Germany and Austria attacked Jewish people, vandalizing and demolishing their homes, businesses, hospitals, and synagogues. Bert's father soon returns home from the hospital, but the atmosphere in Gmunden is unsafe. Bert and his sister will never attend school in Germany again.
I don't really know if anyone, my father, made any serious effort to leave or to escape. I know there were some efforts made to immigrate to the United States, but as I was told then, as I understood then, that we had a quota number assigned to us from the American consulate in Stuttgart to immigrate to the United States. There were X number of people allowed to immigrate to the United States. And in order for us to get to the United States under that number, which was issued to us, we would have had to wait till 1945.
While at first the Nazi government encourages the Jewish population to leave Germany, when World War II begins in September, the situation changes. The German government begins to restrict Jewish travel, and countries around the world severely limit the immigration of German refugees. The 4 Jewish families who did not have the resources to leave Gmünden earlier have become stranded in Germany. Throughout 1939, 14-year-old Bert and his father carry bricks at a military construction site. This is their only means of obtaining food rations for the family.
We had no income. We had no money, because whatever money we had in our savings or bank accounts had been frozen. We had no access to it. And things were very, very, very difficult. Nevertheless, there were some neighbors, some Christians, some people who left at night bread and butter and eggs and milk and potatoes on our doorsteps on our house. They did not want to be recognized. They didn't want to be known. I'm forever grateful for those people, to those people.
In 1940, Germany invades and occupies most of Western Europe. Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France quickly surrender to the powerful German army. Within Germany, as all available materials are devoted to the war effort, food and other resources become scarce and are rationed to the civilian population. In March of 1940, the ration cards of Jewish people are stamped with a J, enabling the authorities to reduce food supplies specifically to Jews.
My mother questioned the policeman who she knew. She had gone to school with him. And he said, well, Bella, don't worry about it. They're probably going to resettle you somewhere where you're going to be working on the land, doing farming, because a lot of men are in the war and they need people to work the land. And we accepted that. Nothing we could do, no place we could go, no place to hide, no place to run to.
After 8 years of Nazi rule, the Jewish families remaining in Gmünden pool their resources by living together in Bert's family home. In December, German police arrive at the doorstep. Bert and his family remain in their home, genuinely believing that their situation cannot become worse.
We packed our suitcases, and what do you take? Here's a house we lived in. My grandparents lived in this house. My great-grandparents lived in that house. There were things in that house for over 150 years which belonged to the family. And you're allowed to take a little suitcase. What do you take?
With no idea where they will be taken, Bert and his family have one last night in their home. At 6 the next morning, the police arrive to take Bert and his family away. From the back of a truck, They watch as the home their family has lived in for 5 generations disappears into the distance.
If you know what you're up against, you can deal with it. But the unknown is the mystery in life. And after what had been happening, we really weren't sure what they were up to. We hadn't heard about concentration camps. We had heard about Umsiedlung, which is resettling. But we never heard from those people who had been resettled. So they must have been all right, otherwise we would have heard from them.
The Jews from Gemünden are transported a short distance to the town of Kassel. They wait in a gymnasium for 2 days, while Jews from throughout central Germany arrive by the hundreds. Each of them is given only 1 bowl of soup. The German police order Bert and the others out of the gymnasium and into the passenger cars of a waiting train. As they step aboard, their luggage is taken from them. They are told it will follow.
As we got out of the train and exiting the trains, there was a lot of noise, a lot of commotion. Rouse, 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 get out of the train. For the first time, I saw a group of SS men who were ordering the evacuation of the trains, of the cars. And there was one particular man there who stood out above all of them. He was wearing a different type of a uniform. He was wearing a SS uniform, but he was wearing a different headgear, and he had his stars on his amulets or epaulets, what is it? Which designated him to be a higher-ranking officer. He also had a dog with him. Someone approached him to ask questions, where we were and what was going on. And after all, we were German citizens, and we didn't appreciate to be treated like he was treating us. And he took out his gun and he shot that man right through the head, straight through the head.
As the train heads through the northern European winter, the temperature steadily drops. From the windows of their unheated passenger cars, the German Jews watch the landscape as they pass through Germany and into Poland. After 4 days without food or water, the passengers gradually lose track of where they are. On December 12th, the train stops. As they stand on the snow-covered platform, the passengers notice that the luggage car is no longer attached to the train. Their belongings have not followed.
It was very cold that day. It must have been about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. It was snowing. It was snowing so badly. I had never seen snow like that, although Gemünden, where I was born and raised, we had snow every winter. But it used to be a soft snow we used to have. It was snowing so hard and it was so cold. And we were not prepared for that kind of weather. We must have marched probably for an hour and a half through the snow and ice. And it was so cold that some people just were left by the wayside. Older people couldn't make it. We were hearing shots, and we realized that those people who were laying on the wayside who couldn't make it, they were just shot. we arrived at a gate. We were marching through a residential area. It was a poor neighborhood, but it still in all was residential, and people were standing on the sidewalks and looking at us. Nobody said anything. But eventually we wound up at this gate. The gate opened up. Column was stopped. There were still approximately 1,000 people, except those who had been killed and died. And column stopped, and this SS officer was on the back of a truck with a megaphone, and he told us, "You are in Riga," which is in Latvia, and you are in the ghetto of Riga.
The SS guards forced Bert and the other German Jews to march away from the train station.
We came into this apartment. It was late in the afternoon. It was getting dark, and we see food on the table. We couldn't figure out why was that food there and where did it come from. We knew the Germans were not that generous or hospitable to us to give us a welcoming party. And after discussions went on in our apartment, some of the older people and my father, the conclusion they arrived at that the food was poisoned. That they put the food there because we were hungry, we hadn't eaten for several days, that we were ravished, we would consume the food, and we would die. And nobody touched the food. And we found out that the food which was left behind was food which was on a table from Latvian Jews who had lived in those houses, that they had been taken out of those houses and had been shot, had been killed.
An SS officer orders the German Jews to occupy the Riga ghetto, and they scramble through the empty streets and into the buildings. The SS appoints a Jewish council to oversee the operations of the ghetto. Within 4 days, this council distributes forced labor assignments to all the residents of the ghetto.
With all of the despair, there were some good times. I remember there was a group of young boys, inclusive myself. We used to play soccer on Sunday. Thinking of it today, I said, how did we do it? You know? How did we get the mental and physical strength to play soccer? We used to see girls. How did we do it? We did, in spite of everything that was going on. And I believe that was part of what kept myself or me keep my sanity. "19,000 Jews from Germany and Latvia inhabit the barbed wire city blocks that make up the Riga ghetto. Each day, guards march Bert and other prisoners to their labor assignments in the city. Bert is a mechanic. In the city, Bert is able to obtain some extra food. He sneaks it home to his mother, who has become sick. Smuggling food into the ghetto is punishable by death. In the spring, Bert's aunts are taken from the ghetto for so-called further resettlement. Days later, their dresses are recognized by a laborer as she sorts through a shipment of clothing taken from people who have been shot in the nearby forest.
I was born amidst a very large family. My grandfather was quite well-to-do, and he built himself a big building. And in the back of the building, in the courtyard, he built houses for each one of the children. So that there were a lot of children playing in the yard. We had our own little building. Of course, everything is relative. In those days, there were small little houses in the back. And I was the youngest one of 6 children.
Paula is born in 1933 in the bustling Jewish section of Ostrowiec, Poland, the very same year Hitler assumes power in neighboring Germany. As a child, Paula is sheltered by her prominent father and grandfather, and her early memories of a happy childhood revolve around her family.
The Germans didn't let us get into the train or a bus or whatever it was. And this was just in the beginning, very beginning. It was still, I'm pretty sure it was still 1939. And Ostrowiec was, Poland was just invaded on September 1st. So this might have been at the very end of 39 or the beginning of 40. And we had a hard time coming back from Warsaw. We had to take a horse and buggy to come home because they wouldn't let us on a train anymore because we were Jews.
On September 1st, 1939, 3 weeks before Paula's 6th birthday, the German army invades Poland. Once in control, the Germans deny basic human rights to the Jewish population. Paula is prevented from starting kindergarten when Jewish children are banned from attending school. Soon afterward, when Paula accompanies her father on a business trip, they are forbidden to take public transportation home from Warsaw.
An open ghetto was formed in our town. By an open ghetto, what I mean is there were posters posted at certain places in our town where Jews were not allowed to cross anymore. They put us into one big room at a section of town which was around a big market. They called it a market. In Europe, most of the medieval towns had marketplaces. It's like a cobblestone area which was a circle. And around this circle there were houses built. And that circle was quite large because all the wagons from the neighboring farms used to come and sell their goods and practice. But naturally, when we were put in that ghetto, no more carts came and no more goods were being sold in that marketplace.
In early 1940, as the Germans solidify their control over Poland, they systematically confiscate Jewish property, businesses, and bank accounts and forbid companies from employing Jews. The Germans order the Jewish people to wear yellow badges on their coats and ignite an anti-Jewish fervor throughout the country. In March, Paula and her family watch as workers construct a barbed wire fence around their neighborhood in Ostrowiec. The Germans restrict the amount of food allowed into the ghetto, forcing those inside to set up a barter system with the people who live outside. They trade their valuables and even their clothing for medicine and extra food.
My brother Jonathan, he ran away during the very beginning of the war. He ran away to Litva. And in doing so, he found out that Jews were being unkindly treated. he went to the Red Cross over in Litva, and he demanded to know how we are. So I recall when the SS came into our house and they took us all, they marched us and they made sure that we all dressed properly. I think my brother and my father were given jackets so that they looked presentable. And they took us to a photographer and they had our picture taken. And that picture ended up in my brother's hand in Litva, who in turn took it with him, and it survived.
In time, most people in the Ostrovets ghetto have nothing left to trade for food to supplement their inadequate rations. People are malnourished, and in the absence of medicine and basic sanitation, deadly diseases sweep the ghetto. The Germans make an effort to conceal these conditions from the outside world.
I was hidden in an attic where my brother lived. My family was separated. My mother and father were someplace else. I don't even know where they were at the time. But I was up in the attic, and my brother was with a lot of younger people, maybe policemen like him, or he wasn't with my parents. He wasn't with anybody. I don't even know where my little brother was. And I stayed up there in the attic for a while. I don't know how long. And we used to be taken down every once in a while. But while I was up there, I had that problem of wetting. And my brother used to beg me every night, please don't wet, it's coming through the ceiling and they're going to notice. And the Germans are going to start looking around. And he used to make fun of me, and they used to call me a kranik, which means a faucet, because that I must have really made marks on that ceiling.
By 1941, Paula and her extended family are forced to live in a single room. Fearing the selections and public hangings which have become regular events in the Ostrovets ghetto, they frequently go into hiding. Paula's brother, Herschel, who works as a policeman under the control of the ghetto administration, is able to warn the family of impending selections. To avoid being selected, Paula moves from one hiding place to another. She hides under haystacks, inside thick plaster walls, and any other place she can possibly fit.
It was in the winter time, because I remember after the selection was over, the snow was on the ground when we came out of our hiding place. And I remember the snow being all pink and red because there was so much blood on it. There were so many killings. And everywhere you looked, the snow was all red. This is all I remember from that selection.
Paula spends most of the year hiding from selections. For an 8-year-old child, it is a bewildering experience. She knows that if the German SS guards find her, they will take her away. Paula's grandmother, aunt, uncle, and cousin are killed during that selection.
I learned how to make myself invisible. I used to disappear myself between people all the time. And I was never conspicuous. I learned that right away. Learned in order to survive. This is not the time to show off. There was no showing off. And this is how I found out that the people in the camp didn't feel comfortable with me around either, because when I used to disappear myself, so to speak, they were in jeopardy, because I used to hide amongst crowds. Wherever there was a crowd or we had to stand up and be counted somewhere, I used to be in the back or between, and never up front, and not in the back either, because if they went around us, I would be in the back. I had to try to be in the middle somewhere, and they didn't like it. The people didn't like it. But I learned how to survive. I did.
In 1942, Paula's 16 and 18-year-old sisters volunteer for resettlement. They believe that as strong young women, they are too valuable as workers for the Germans to harm. The SS puts them on a train, which takes them directly to the gas chambers of the newly built Treblinka death camp. Later in the year, Paula's family is moved to a labor camp within the Ostrovets ghetto. While her parents work in a nearby factory, Paula manages to avoid selection. The Jewish population of Ostrovets shrinks as the people around Paula are selected for deportation.
Amongst the people in the camp, children were not welcome because, first of all, a lot of people were angry. Their children were not there. A lot of people were angry because I jeopardized their lives. And a lot of people maybe would have liked to have helped me. But most of them, I presented a terrible threat being there next to them at any time. So I wasn't very welcome by my own people either in those years. It was very difficult to survive as a child because I didn't know anything. The only thing I knew is that if my mother is there, my father is there, that must be okay. Then I'm safe. Then I'm okay. Because my brothers are there, my father is there, then it must be fine.
By the end of 1942, 9-year-old Paula is one of the few Jewish children left in Ostrovets.
The rabbi that we had for our Talmudic studies, he used to beat the hell out of us, especially once a week, where we had to go over what we learned. At one time, we came up with a scheme, the fellas, including myself, I may have been the instigator, I'm not sure, that we got to teach that rabbi a lesson. So since my father had a leather wholesale supply house, we had everything that dealt with leather and shoemaking. And I brought in paste. And we mixed the paste with water, and it became a real thick paste. And as the rabbi, and we used to call him the Malamed, used to teach us, going over, and gradually, he used to fall asleep. And his beard was on the table. And we put the paste on the table, on the beard. Of course, the paste hardened quite fast. And he tried to pick himself up and it doesn't go. Well, we panicked at that point. The joke was over and we went for his wife. And you can imagine in our hometown, she came with a scissor and cut off the beard.
Saul was born in 1926 and raised along with his sister and 2 brothers in Dove, Czechoslovakia. Fewer than 7,000 people live in this secluded mountain town. Saul's father owns a successful leather supply store. He's a traditional man who is well respected in the town's tight-knit Jewish community. Saul, on the other hand, is known for his mischievous pranks. Saul's endless pranks embarrass his dignified father. Saul's endless pranks embarrass his dignified father.
I remember my bar mitzvah. The whole town participated in it, old and young. I remember the speech that I had to deliver on my bar mitzvah. Of course, I rehearsed it for 6 months. All I can tell you is it was a happy day in my life. My parents were extremely proud of me. In fact, my father, who was at that point the gabbai of the temple, or which is the equivalent of being the president of the synagogue, he told me, I hope you'll grow up someday and you'll be a gabbai or the president of the congregation. That was the highest wish a father had in my hometown for his son.
In March 1939, German troops occupy Czechoslovakia. In exchange for the Hungarian government support, Adolf Hitler gives Hungary the southernmost region of Czechoslovakia, which includes Saul's hometown of Dove. Hungarian troops quietly occupy this new territory. For the time being, the Jewish community continues as it has for centuries. Saul turns 13 in July. On September 1st, the German army invades Poland and World War II begins.
I had once a very, very good close friend. You know, people have friends, a lot of friends. So one is always the special one. His name was Moshe Kirschenbaum. There again, I'm not sure I can spell the name. Moshe Kirschenbaum. We used to hang around day and night. Wherever we had free time, we were together. We used to go for long walks, talking about many things. Often the subject was Zionism. Someday we'll grow up, we will not need our parents' permission, we'll go to Palestine. We used to talk about many things, including girls. Who was prettier? Was it Haichu or Rivchu? I mean, you know, it was like young kids having discussions. He also went to yeshiva with me in Ersheva. We were very, very close. I often think of him. He did not survive. Like many others, he just did not make it.
Although Hungary officially aligns itself with Germany in 1940, the Jewish population of Dove does not experience anti-Semitic persecution. Saul completes his schooling at the yeshiva and begins working for his father. The family leather supply store is more prosperous than ever.
Men in a certain age group, like my father's age group, he was at that point, I believe, 42, they were taken to forced labor, not in a concentration camp, working with Hungarian uniforms, not with not with a gun, not with pistol, just working manual labor behind the Hungarian soldiers. They used to be called Munkatábor. I vaguely remember that name. And my father was there, but we used to communicate. He used to come home periodically.
By 1941, the Hungarian government forbids Jews from serving in the armed forces. Instead, Jewish men are drafted into the newly established Hungarian Labor Service. In June, when the Germans invade the Soviet Union, divisions of this labor force dig trenches and clear landmines for the Hungarian and German armies. During his father's lengthy absences, 15-year-old Saul runs the family leather business.
We did not have radios, but we did have a lot of rumors. And the rumors were, of course, that terrible atrocities are taking place. Here and there we used to see a person at night who ran away from Kolomé, who told us tales that the whole community was wiped out. We didn't believe it. We thought it's fabricated. The elders of our community from the synagogue, they, after listening to this, tried to reassure that we don't believe, that we can't believe this, we have no facts. Nobody is capable of doing such atrocities. Nobody would do a thing like that.
The German army quickly occupies much of the Soviet Union, including the eastern part of Poland. In the wake of this invasion, German killing squads and local collaborators murder 1.5 million civilians. In the Polish town of Kolomé, near the Hungarian border, thousands of Jews are killed and the remaining Jewish population is forced into a ghetto. Kolomé is only 25 miles away from Saul's hometown of Dove. In the safety of Hungarian territory, Saul continues to work with his father at the leather store. The last 2,000 Jews in Kolomé will be shot by the following February.
There was a very fat movie mogul who opened the door, and he tore up my contract and said my contract was cancelled, not the film, only my contract, because I was Jewish. And I didn't have, and my mother was Jewish, and my father was Jewish, and I didn't have an Aryan grandmother, and I didn't even know what that meant. And I got home, and I was absolutely livid. I was terribly upset and terribly furious, and I started screaming at my mother, and then a lot of questions came up which I should have asked before and never did. How come? What is going on? And my mother kept saying, well, it has nothing to do with us. This is happening in Germany, only in Germany. They don't mean us, they only mean the German Jews. Jews, it could never happen here. We are a civilized nation. But I didn't understand. Why? Why? I mean, you know, what is wrong? What, have the German Jews done anything? No. No, they haven't done anything. So why does God not like the German Jews, or what is it? You know, a lot of questions which my mother couldn't answer anyway. And she said, because she had said all along, this is just a hoax, everybody's laughing about it. And I said, are the Jews in Germany laughing?
Born on October 1st, 1918, Sylvia is one of 3 sisters who are raised by their widowed mother. The family lives in Vienna, the cultural center of Austria. At the age of 4, Sylvia is given her first part in a play, and from that day on, her life revolves around the theater. The family is not religious, and Sylvia's Jewish heritage has no effect on her until she is 18, when she is called upon to sign a contract for her first starring role. Eventually, Sylvia finds a job with a traveling theater group. On March 12, 1938, the actors leave Austria. By chance, on the very same day the German army enters the country.
I had become a gypsy. I went from one country to the other, wherever they would let me in, work, stay a while, go on to the next, work. I spent a lot of time in crummy little offices in police stations, not because I was arrested, but asking for a visa, permission to work, permission to stay, another week, another week, another week. And actually for 2 years, I was always a bit ahead of the Nazis. Again, had nothing to do with foresight. It just happened that way. I remember I had a contract in Czechoslovakia, had laryngitis, had to cancel. So I was in another country just as the Germans marched into Czechoslovakia. When Poland was crushed, it went from one country to the other, always ahead of the Nazis. I wasn't running away from them. It just happened that way.
The Germans occupy Czechoslovakia in March 1939 and invade Poland in September. As the turmoil of World War II begins to consume Europe, Sylvia travels with her theater group to Switzerland, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Belgium. By the time Sylvia reaches Belgium, borders have become difficult to cross and emigration from German-occupied territory is nearly impossible. One of Sylvia's sisters is able to leave Austria for Great Britain, and Sylvia is concerned for her mother and her other sister's safety. She begins working to get them out of German-occupied territory.
The first, I can't even say Nazi, but German I ever saw floating in one of the wonderful canals in Amsterdam, very dead, I must say. That was the first German I saw. And what happened, if you know Amsterdam, it has a lot of canals, like Venice, except no gondoliers. And it's a marvelous place for drowning those lovely Germans. In the Dutch underground would stalk the German soldiers who went at night into the nightclubs and got very drunk, or into the red light district. And then at a certain moment they would shove them into the canals. And then the next morning they were fished out. They had their furlough. So that's when I saw my very first German. It was wonderful.
In the beginning of May, Sylvia manages to get her mother and sister out of Austria. They meet in the city of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. A few days later, Germany invades the Netherlands, along with Belgium and Luxembourg. For the first time, Sylvia finds herself in a German-occupied country. Although there is a large German military presence, for the moment the Nazis do not target the Dutch Jews.
Only Jewish artists were performing on stage, only Jewish artists in the orchestra, only Jewish costume designer, choreographers. And because of this, we had, of course, incredible entertainment there, because you couldn't have afforded to hire even half of these people under normal circumstances, what was now on a stage. It was fantastic. And the audiences, it was unbelievable. They couldn't wait to get to our theater. But there was also that whatever you said on stage has been censored. It was sent first to them And they had to go through every script to see what was said. For instance, if there was a line which said blonde, blue-eyed and gorgeous, they crossed it out because a Jew was never to be allowed to be blonde, blue-eyed or gorgeous. Stupid things like that. And then it was forbidden for Jews to get married in the city hall. Synagogues were already closed. So where could they get married? Only in the Jüdisches Haubuch. So they were also married in our theater. So whatever took place in this theater on cultural activity, from A to Z, took place in this one theater.
In January 1941, the German occupation government requires all Jews in the Netherlands to register with the census office. In February, when 389 of these Jews are deported, Dutch workers call a one-day general strike in protest. The Germans crush this resistance and begin restricting Jewish activity throughout the country. Sylvia manages to find an acting job in the Hollandse Schouwburg Theater, which is designated by the Germans as Jewish only. Despite increasing suppression, Jewish cultural life in Amsterdam manages to continue under the German occupation government.
From one night to the next, this theater was turned into a deportation center for Jews. And if we didn't like it, we could volunteer and be on the first transport tonight. And then they came, our audiences. By the hundreds, by the hundreds, by the hundreds. And we had each a duty to perform, which was impossible to perform because we didn't have blankets, we didn't have water, we didn't have milk, we had nothing. It was a theater. We were not prepared for it. And everybody wanted to know what's going to happen, where they're going to send us, and why, and can you help us, and can you get us out? And they came with candlesticks, and they came with blankets, and they came with books, and they dragged half the household behind, and we couldn't do anything. And then at night, trucks came, and off they went.
By the beginning of 1942, the Jewish-only Hollandse Schouwburg Theater has become renowned. Non-Jews regularly attend the theater even though they must borrow Jewish identity cards to gain admission. The German occupation government increases restrictions on the Dutch Jews, and by April it forces them to wear the Jewish badge for identification. In July, mass deportations begin. Although she avoids this first wave of deportations, Sylvia learns that she has been put on a list of artists and intellectuals to be immediately deported.
Mother Superior had gotten permission to go with the children for a walk, weather permitting, around blocks, always the same 4 blocks, 3 times. And at that time, on the last block, there was a little house set way back from the street, like a little cloister. And one of the guys would be waiting there. And I would walk at the end, always at the end, with 4 or 5 children, never more. And hold back. And just as the children turned the last corner, move them into where one of the guys stood. And then these children would be sent all over the country to farmers or whoever was safe and would take them in. So it worked wonderful for about 6 weeks. And then one day, Gus, the guy who should have been in the door, wasn't there anymore. Who was there instead, which I didn't know, there was a flower man who ran into me, putting tulips in my hand. As it turned out, he told me not to go home anymore, that they're wise to us and to get out of here.
From her friends at the theater, Sylvia hears about a Catholic orphanage where Jewish children await deportation. Once it becomes clear that Sylvia herself is in danger of being deported, she moves into the orphanage and, in effect, disappears. Undercover, she works with the Dutch underground smuggling some of the children out of the country. With spies and Nazi collaborators everywhere, Sylvia and 2 other women from the Dutch underground go into hiding.
Sylvia is born in Vienna, Austria in 1918, near the end of World War I. A month later, on November 11th, Germany is defeated and must sign the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty requires Germany to disarm and to pay for much of Europe to be rebuilt. In order to make these payments, the German government imposes huge taxes on the people of Germany. By the time Bert is born in central Germany in 1925, the Germans have been making payments for 7 years. Throughout the country, people are impoverished. One year later, Saul is born in the isolated mountain town of Dove, Czechoslovakia. Because of their location, Saul and the people of Dove are sheltered from the politics and instability which entangle most of Europe. In 1929, the United States stock market crashes, and the Great Depression spreads from one country to another. Germany's fragile economy collapses, and soon 6 million Germans are unemployed. After 11 years of economic chaos, many Germans are drawn to the growing Nazi Party and its promises of a glorious, prosperous future. Their leader, Adolf Hitler, blames the Jewish people for Germany's troubles. The Nazis gained control of the German government in 1933. In that same year, Paula is born in the Jewish quarter of Ostrowiec, a city neighboring Poland. In 1935, the German government passes the Nuremberg Laws, which deny basic civil rights to the Jews of Germany. Jewish people gradually lose their jobs, their businesses, and their savings accounts, and Jewish children are no longer able to attend public schools. Meanwhile, the Germans begin to rebuild their armed forces, and in 1936 they form a military coalition with Italy and Japan. 2 years later, on March 11, 1938, Hitler's troops enter Sylvia's homeland of Austria. They take the country without a fight. Austrians, seduced by promises of prosperity, welcome German authority with open arms.
Having left Austria just before its invasion by Germany, Sylvia arrives safely in Belgium, which seems far removed from German aggression. In defiance of an agreement Adolf Hitler has made with Great Britain and France, he orders his troops to invade Czechoslovakia in March. Hitler divides Czechoslovakia and gives the southern region to Hungary in exchange for its cooperation during the invasion. Dovhely, Saul's hometown, is in this new Hungarian region. The German leadership extends its policies into its new territories. All that Bert's family has gradually lost over the last 6 years, Jews in the new territories will lose in a matter of months. The same is true for gypsies, homosexuals, disabled people, political dissidents, and others. On August 23rd, Germany signs a treaty with the Soviet Union in order to pacify Soviet opposition to German expansion. A week later, on September 1st, the German army invades Poland. The Soviets, in accordance with their agreement with Germany, occupy eastern Poland. Great Britain and France declare war on Germany, and World War II begins. As the Germans quickly defeat the Polish army, the people of central and western Poland, including Paula and 2.1 million other Jews, become subject to Nazi rule.
In 1940, the Germans brutalized the people of Poland. They target the Jews in particular, systematically confiscating their businesses, jobs, bank accounts, and property. Throughout German-occupied Poland, Germans segregate Jews from society by forcing them into ghettos. Paula's family home is incorporated into the ghetto of Ostrowiec. In Hungarian territory, Saul and the other Jewish people are not actively persecuted. In April, the German army moves north, attacking Denmark and Norway. In May, the Germans enter Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. All of these countries are quickly defeated. Sylvia is in the Netherlands when the Germans take over. The Germans do not immediately persecute the people of Western Europe. They do, however, forbid them from leaving the region. By June, the Jews who remain in Germany, including Bert, are also stranded, now that nearly all European nations are under German influence. Most other countries, including the United States, strictly limit the immigration of German refugees. The Germans order Great Britain to make peace with them, but the British refuse. In response, Germany launches a massive airstrike against London and other British cities, but the Royal British Air Force resists the attack. Great Britain remains defiant, though they are virtually the only country left fighting against German aggression.
In April and May, the Germans invade Yugoslavia and Greece. With these countries defeated, all of mainland Europe is under German or Soviet influence, or has declared itself neutral. On June 22nd, the German army surprises the Soviet Union in an invasion known as Operation Barbarossa. Before the Soviets can defend themselves, 3 million German soldiers sweep to the east and to the north and quickly occupy most of Soviet Europe. This invasion follows the Nazi leadership's decision to murder every Jewish man, woman, and child in Europe, the final solution. To this end, killing squads known as Einsatzgruppen follow the German army through the Soviet Union and shoot more than 1.25 million Soviet Jews, in addition to hundreds of thousands of gypsies and communists. Though Saul's town is only 25 miles away from the Soviet border, these killing squads stay out of Hungarian territory. In October, slave laborers imprisoned at Auschwitz are forced to build a huge camp with 4 crematoria, the death camp which will be known as Birkenau. Meanwhile, in other camps and in ghettos throughout German territory, slave laborers like Paula's family in German-occupied Poland begin to constitute a major part of the workforce that keeps the German military supplied. Meanwhile, in Western Europe, the Germans slowly isolate the Jews from the rest of society. In the Netherlands, where Sylvia lives, a curfew is established and Jews are barred from one public place after another. On December 7th, Japan, which is Germany's ally, attacks the United States Navy at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Declaring war, the United States joins the Allies to fight alongside Great Britain and the Soviet Union. In mid-December, German authorities arrive at Bert's home in Gmunden, Germany, and inform them that they are going to be resettled for the war effort.
Into 1942, the German army remains invincible on the battlefield. Despite having the United States and the Soviet Union as powerful new enemies, Germany conquers lands deep in Eastern Europe and as far south as Africa. The German government controls almost all of the Jewish population of Europe. In January, high-ranking German officials meet in a villa in Wannsee, outside of Berlin, to coordinate the final solution. They emerge from the meeting with a cohesive strategy to efficiently murder every Jewish man, woman, and child in Europe. Throughout the springtime, prisoners are deported from Polish ghettos to the new death camps where they are killed by the thousands. Paula's family hides in order to avoid being selected for these deportations. In the summer, Sylvia also goes into hiding after the Germans begin deporting Jews from the Netherlands. In July, and again in October, the German and Italian armies experience their first military defeats to British troops in Africa. In November, the Soviet army puts an end to Germany's relentless eastbound progress, stopping them at the city of Stalingrad. Bert's family has been resettled to the Riga ghetto in Latvia. Like most of the Jews in German-occupied Europe, they survive as slave laborers forced to work for the German war effort. Meanwhile, the Hungarian government resists German pressure to persecute the Jews who live in Hungarian territory. As nearby Soviet, Slovakian, and Polish populations are decimated, Saul and his family remain safe.